What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Sacramento. Here's a quick synopsis. A man, Ricky, in an attempt to rekindle a friendship, tricks his old pal Glenn to go on a road trip to Sacramento. The film stars Michael Angarano, Michael Cera, Kristen, Stewart, and Maya Erskine. Standout performances. You may not know the name Michael Angarano. He's not super well known, but if you are my age, you most likely know him as the lead of the Disney teen superhero movie Sky High, in which he co-starred with Kurt Russell. This movie came out during a time period where we were not given 5 superhero movies a year. Angarano also is in the early scenes in Almost Famous. More recently, he had a supporting role in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. In Sacramento, he plays Ricky, who has no direction in his life and realizes he has no friends. He's a person who wants to turn his life around. This is very much a comedic performance that for the most part I found to be effective. Angarano is not only the co-lead of this movie, he's also the film's director and co-writer, and in my opinion did a good job. It's a well-made movie that balances strong emotions with silly comedy. Alright, let's get into it. The most polarizing performance in Sacramento far and away is given by Michael Cera, who is, unlike Angarano, super well known. You know the films, Superbad, Juno, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. We got so used to him playing sweet, naive characters that it really is jarring to see him play Glenn in Sacramento, who has a lot of anxiety due to the fact that he's going to be a father for the first time. I have to think that's what drew Cera to this character, is the fact that it's different than any other character he's ever played before. Cera has definitely in the past had a comedic persona, and with this movie he's turning that on its head. I walked away from this movie being both impressed by his committed performance and annoyed by the character, which is the whole point. I think, like me, the first time you watch this movie you will be distracted by the fact that that is Michael Cera giving this kind of performance. Like, how could the kid from Arrested Development be playing this unlikable of a character at times? Cera recently has had a bit of a career rejuvenation after being in Barbie. His next films include Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme coming later this month. It's great to see him finally work with that singular filmmaker. I mean, everyone has talked about the fact that Michael Cera seems to be the perfect fit for a Wes Anderson movie, and it's finally happening. And he's going to re-team with Scott Pilgrim director Edgar Wright on the remake of The Running Man starring Glenn Powell, and it was just announced that Cera himself is going to make his directorial debut with the movie Love Is Not the Answer, starring Pamela Anderson, Steve Coogan, Fred Heckinger, and Jamie Dornan. What I always find fascinating about an actor like Michael Cera is he could have definitely gone by playing the exact same kind of character over and over and over again, but has instead taken his work in a different direction, and I respect him for that. I also cannot talk about Michael Cera without stating that his vocal performance in the Batman Lego movie as Robin is one of the best performances you will ever see in an animated movie. Another big name in the movie Sacramento is Kristen Stewart, and one could watch this movie and say that Kristen Stewart is given the thankless role of pregnant wife who isn't in a lot of the movie, but her character Rosie helps lays the groundwork for what Glenn is like as a person. She at one point confesses that she's happy he wasn't there during a moment she has to go to the hospital because of how nervous he is in those kinds of situations. Stewart is not giving one of the best performances of her career. It's not a showcase for her, but her character does serve a purpose in the movie. And yeah, I'm biased because I'm a big fan of hers as an actress, but I will say I found her to be super effective during those scenes with Michael Cera. They paint a picture of a guy who is stressing everyone out, including his pregnant wife. It's worth noting that Kristen Stewart has a long history with Michael Angarano, as they both starred in the television film Speak all the way back in 2004. Kristen Stewart will next star in the movie The Wrong Girls with Seth Rogen Aaliyah Shawkat, Lakeith Stanfield, Tony Hale, and Kumail Nanjiani, and is set to make her directorial debut, The Chronology of Water, starring Imogen Poots. And finally, I've only just started to take notice of actress Maya Erskine. I thought she was really great in the television series Mr. and Mrs. Smith alongside Donald Glover, and I really enjoyed her in the romantic comedy Plus One, with her co-star being Jack Quaid. In Sacramento, she plays Ellie, who had a quick fling with Angarano's Ricky. She ends up having a baby and being a single mother after he doesn't respond to her text. I like this movie a lot. I like the performances in this movie. I just don't know if I find the relationship between Angarano's Ricky and Erskine's Ellie to be all that believable. And I don't want to get into any spoilers, so that's all I will say is I don't know if I think the film's ending is realistic. Maya Erskine is next going to lend her voice to the animated film Wildwood, which also stars Jacob Tremblay, Carey Mulligan, Mahershala Ali, Awkwafina, Angela Bassett, Jake Johnson, and Charlie Day. What I like about the movie Sacramento is that it shows how these two characters are in the exact same situation, have a history with one another, but have issues together. What's also worth noting is the fact that Ricky is more forthcoming with his issues while Glenn is in full denial mode. Like, Ricky immediately sees why he should reconnect with Glenn. They are about to go through the exact same thing. They are two guys who don't have friends other than each other, but Glenn just can't admit to that fact. I think the movie wants to be about a lot of things like grief, like marriage, like relationships, but it works best when you look at it as a buddy movie, a movie about friendship. That's what I can get behind when it comes to the movie Sacramento. I think all of those other things are there and they're interesting at times, although they're not fully developed. I think what is there about friendship is the best thing the movie has to offer. Because I do feel like we are living in weird times when it comes to male friendships and what happens with them as time evolves. I don't think I would have liked this movie as much if these two characters were brothers, because we've seen that movie before. If they were related, I wouldn't have found that as interesting as I do a movie about friendship, especially given the fact that the two characters have not followed up with each other. One of them, Ricky, doesn't know the other one's wife is pregnant, while Glenn doesn't know that Ricky's father had passed away. So one of the many things I was thinking about watching this movie is it effective just as a straight up comedy? And I'm not sure. I like the movie more as a character study about Ricky and Glenn. Yes, there are funny moments in the movie, but the dynamic between the two characters is what propels it for me. And I could be wrong here. I don't think the intention of this movie was for it to be a laugh out riot, because it could have been that. You have Michael Cera, who has been one of the funniest actors I have ever seen. You have him in your movie and he's not playing the funniest part. He's trying to do something different. There's real sadness in both of these characters. I also think this is a case of a movie where both actors could have switched parts. Like, I think Michael Cera could have played Ricky, and I do believe that Angarano could have played Glenn. But my guess is that Michael Cera was probably not interested in playing Ricky, that he probably looked at it as a character that he's played before, the guy who had issues but is now self-aware. Like, the nervous energy that Michael Cera is giving in this movie is similar to that of what Joaquin Phoenix is doing in Beau is Afraid. So why exactly am I talking about a movie that probably none of you have seen, that made less than $1 million at the box office? Because it stars actors that I have a strong history with, Michael Cera and Kristen Stewart. They are on those list of actors that I will watch any movie they are in. I want to see what they are doing, not only because I like their past performances, because I'm also interested in their future decisions and what they are doing with their careers right now. I do think there are weirdly similarities between these two actors as well. Like, they could have used that early fame to be in bigger movies, but they became less and less interested in doing so. So they make these smaller movies with good directors, good scripts that not a lot of people have seen, and then they reappear in the public when they show up in movies that more people see. Like, there are so many people out there that went a decade ignoring Kristen Stewart, and then Spencer happened and they started to like her again. And the exact same thing happened with Michael Cera. He went away from the comedies that made him a super famous figure, and then he showed up in Molly's Game trying to do weird character parts. And then Barbie happened and everyone went back to talking about how much they like Michael Cera. Cera is interesting because right now we are without a great comedic movie star. Sorry to Kevin Hart. I like you sometimes, but I don't like the fact that you're in every mid-comedy right now. And I really did believe at one point that Michael Cera was going to become the biggest face in comedy. And I really do believe that if Scott Pilgrim vs. the World were a bigger hit, it could have happened for Michael Cera. I mean, we love that movie now, but it did not do well at the box office. So yeah, there's a part of me that wishes that Michael Cera was a gigantic comedic movie star, but I like the fact that he did not take his career in the obvious direction. And the same thing goes for Kristen Stewart. She did not make the obvious choices with the movies that she picked, with the filmmakers that she's worked with. And I really do believe this. Instead of chasing relevance as an actor, you should be chasing consistency, because at some point being uber consistent is going to get you the attention that you are seeking as a performer. Yes, in some ways Kristen Stewart's career will always be defined by Twilight, and Michael Cera's career will always be defined by Superbad. Those are success stories that they're not going to escape. But I love the fact that they continue to get better as actors. I'm going to continue to harp on Michael Cera because he did something in this movie that I was not expecting him to do. I thought he was going to give an old school comedic Michael Cera performance that was going to have me laughing out loud. I thought it was going to be that kind of performance. I thought he was going to give the funniest performance of the year. That's what I went in expecting, and instead, he's playing this guy who is literally worried about everything and won't admit it to absolutely anyone, yet it's so obvious. And that's part of the reason that I ultimately land on this being a very good performance, because you do end up feeling real empathy for the character and what he's going through. The movie does take the character of Glenn to an absurd extreme, but it works because Cera is just so committed to playing this character. Sacramento is a movie that does play a trick on the audience. I mean, in the early scenes, you think that Ricky is the one whose life is falling apart and Glenn is the one who has everything together because he's got the wife, he's got the kid on the way, and here's this guy still grieving his father years later. He's the mess. But then in the middle of the movie, you realize that both of these characters are in the exact same situation, and one of them is willing to admit that, while the other one wants to avoid all of his problems altogether. That's the smartest decision the movie made, that one of the characters is not ahead of the other character, that they are at the same playing field. Career-wise, they're both going nowhere, and they're emotional lives are both in turmoil. I usually don't talk about the runtime of the movies I talk about on this podcast, but I do love the fact that this movie is only 90 minutes long. I mean, this is the kind of movie that used to be popular, under 90 minutes and about real people. And I do think that those kinds of films deserve a place in the movie landscape. They're usually super well written, they know where they're going, and most importantly, you end up relating to a lot of the things that's happening on screen. I love all kinds of movies, blockbusters, action films, you name it. But every once in a while, I want to watch a movie about real people that I can relate to as a human being. Another thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to the film Sacramento is the fact that both of these main characters are lying to each other about where they are at in life. I mean, Angarano's character, Ricky, is is trying to convince Glenn that his father just passed away, while at first Glenn won't tell Ricky that his wife Rosie is pregnant and that he's losing his job. I just find the relationship between the two characters to be oddly complex. I mean, you usually don't see that in movies about male friendships. They're usually really simple. And it just came to me that the guy who was the co-lead of Superbad, one of the best movies about male friendship, is also in this movie, Sacramento. I mean, Michael Cera has played all aspects of male friendship at this point in his career. I mean, how insane would it have been if Jonah Hill was the co-lead of Sacramento? That might have been even too meta for the movie to handle. I do think one of the aspects in which the movie doesn't fully investigate is why did these two characters have a falling out in the first place? Like, why has it been years and years since they've seen each other? I mean, they really don't get into that whatsoever. I mean, yes, you can tell that Glenn has clearly been annoyed by Ricky in the past, but the movie doesn't talk about how they had some huge argument and that's why they haven't talked to each other in years and years. You're just supposed to buy into the fact that they've believed that they've outgrown each other. I mean, there's a hilarious scene in the movie where Michael Cera's Glenn is trying to reconnect with his college roommate, and the guy can tell that Glenn is having a complete and utter meltdown. I don't know how everyone is exactly going to react to this movie, but I think it's going to be hard to find anyone who would rather hang out with Glenn than Ricky. And that's why I've come to the conclusion that I think the movie does a better job at developing the issues that Glenn is going through than it does with Ricky. I mean, yes, you see that Ricky has some clear commitment issues. He's grieving his father. He wants to change. And maybe that's the big issue of the movie. Maybe they should have given us a scene where Ricky was being the old Ricky, where he was being unreliable, where he wasn't being a great person. Because in Sacramento, Ricky is the fun one. Ricky is the one you want to see on screen. Ricky is the one having a good time, talking to other people, being a reasonable person, while Glenn just won't lighten up whatsoever. I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I do wish that Kristen Stewart and Maya Erskine were in more of this movie, but I always thought that that was going to be the case. Like, it just didn't seem like Kristen Stewart was going to have a large part in this movie. It always felt to me like it was going to be a supporting role. I do want to see her in more comedies because I do think she's really funny, especially in the film Happiest Season with Mackenzie Davis. That's another thing that you could really nitpick about this movie. I mean, how did Glenn end up with Rosie? Was he at one point easier to deal with? Like, they give you all of the background information about Ricky and then give you nothing about Glenn, but then on screen they develop the character of Glenn, and Ricky kind of stays a one-note character throughout the movie. He's having a good time. He's trying to change his life. He's doing silly things to try to rekindle this friendship he once had. So this is something you're either going to really like about this movie or not like about this movie. Both characters kind of stay the same by the end of the film. They just kind of tolerate each other by the film's end. Now, I appreciate that because I believe that's way more realistic than most movies are about friendships and character dynamics. I mean, you don't totally change your opinion about somebody and you don't change your personality altogether. So in a way, the movie gives you a happy ending, but the characters don't drastically change. They've just somewhat improved, which I think is very honest to real life. The last thing I'll say about the movie Sacramento is the biggest selling point to this movie is to see Michael Cera, a well-known actor, do something he's never done before. Give a different kind of performance, not play the guy you're always rooting for. I want to see the actors I really like do things in movies I've never seen them do before, and that's exactly what Michael Cera is doing in the movie Sacramento. And whether you like the movie or not, if you end up watching it, you will never look at Michael Cera the same way. I can be real cynical when it comes to movies, but I do believe it takes real courage for an actor to do something unexpected depicted on screen. So while it might not end up being my all-time favorite performance given by Michael Cera, his work as Glenn in Sacramento is commendable. And I'm really pumped to see him continue stretch himself as an actor. I can't wait to see him in Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out the film Sacramento. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about the film The Assessment, starring Himesh Patel, Elizabeth Olsen, and Alicia Vikander. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.